It's okay if you're a Muslim, a Christian, or a Jew.
It's okay if you're agnostic and you don't know what to do.
An all-inclusive celebration.
No contractual obligation.
Happy Chrismahanukwanzakah to you.
And pagans too.
Welcome to Simply Robotics, the podcast exploring the animation industry one episode at a time. I'm your host, Monique. You can find me on all social media platforms at Simply Robotics, SIMPLYROBOTIX. When listening to the show, use the hashtag SimplyRoboticsPod to join in the conversation. Habari Gani. It is the first day of Kwanzaa, Umoja, which means unity. So it was only right that this episode is dedicated to A Rugrats Kwanzaa. Wiki says that this was season 7, episode 16. HULU says that this was season 8, episode 13. I didn't look any further to find out who's actually right. I would have to go to like the Nickelodeon digital archives or somewhat. This episode aired April 22nd of 2001. From my little bit of Googling, it seems like this was a part of Nickelodeon's 2001 diverse holiday rollout. It seems like they had a bunch of shows trying to cover the various holidays that's celebrated around this time of year. This episode was directed by Anthony Bell. So just a little background on him from Wiki. Anthony is an American animator, film director, and screenwriter. After getting his start as a character layout artist and cleanup artist for The Simpsons in the early 90s, he got the opportunity to direct a number of episodes for Nickelodeon's hit Rugrats, and most recently he has directed 4 episodes of the Adult Swim animated television series The Boondocks. Unlike all the other episodes, I do not have a trailer for this. I can say it is very, very much available through a variety of websites online. However, it is available for free with a Hulu subscription through their platform. From Hulu, like I said, it is season 8, episode 13. That way you can find it. So this is Hulu's synopsis. Is when Aunt T visits the Carmichaels to celebrate Kwanzaa, she tells Susie the holiday is a time to honor the legacy of our great people. Now, according to Wiki, this is their synopsis of the episode. Toddler Susie Carmichael is visited by her great auntie on Christmas. Auntie wants to celebrate Kwanzaa instead with Susie's family, her parents Lucy and Randy, and older siblings Alyssa, Buster, and Edwin. The Carmichaels do not normally observe the holiday, and Susie has never heard of it. Auntie describes it as honoring the legacy of greatness of their ancestors. Susie's friends Tommy, Chucky, Kimmy, Phil, and Lil are invited to the Carmichaels' home as a part of the festivities. Susie feels inferior to the rest of her family after Auntie congratulates them on all their accolades. Auntie decides to hold Karamu early to bring the family together. She gives Susie and her siblings presents, though Susie is disappointed to receive a scrapbook. Susie is not assigned a role in the family's preparations for Karamu, leading her to believe she is inferior to the rest of the family for never winning an award. That is the episode, but it doesn't matter. All those words mean nothing because when you see it, you see it. So I could just read this, and maybe it's a half spoiler for those of you who have never watched it, but still, the way that the episode plays out, it's not really a spoiler. I did see this when it first came out, and I haven't seen it probably in like 10 to 15 years. Like, I'm pretty sure the last time I watched, because this episode wasn't coming on TV often, like at all. Rugrats would still be played, but not like this episode. Not really their holiday. Like, I feel like the Hanukkah episode too doesn't get played that much, or wasn't getting played that much. So even though I was still watching Rugrats up until like the very end, whenever I was seeing it on TV, I know for a fact I haven't seen the Kwanzaa episode in like, since high school. My first impression is I vaguely also remember this, but I do remember it being one of the first depictions of Kwanzaa I ever saw. I celebrate the holidays with my Caribbean family, and it's always Christmas. And my American side never celebrated Kwanzaa, so I never really knew how it worked. And I really don't remember as a child learning about Kwanzaa in elementary school. I became aware of it in junior high, which was around the time that this came out. And it was just like, to my understanding at the time, back in 2001, I was a preteen. I understood it as being like a Black American holiday, and my Black American family didn't celebrate it. And I should probably still ask them, how come we never celebrated Kwanzaa? But we didn't, so I didn't really know how it worked. I can say now, watching it again, like, this is such an easy and simplified depiction of Kwanzaa that, like, regardless of your age or like your race or cultural background, it makes Kwanzaa, which is not complicated but very easy to understand. And I feel like it absolutely does hold up. In about another year, 2 years, it would be 20 years since its release, which is so wild to think of. And the episode is like still funny, it's still entertaining, and it's wild informative. And because one of Susie's brothers is like a nerd, he just kind of blurts out some information, like some real legit information that later gets simplified. But I'm like, wow, this was a good way to share these facts. So as for the characters, you have the Carmichaels, Susie Carmichael, like we had said earlier, like her sister, her brothers, her parents. Aunt T, which I thought was just important to note, was voiced by Irma Dolores Player Hall. She was born on June 3rd, 1935 in Texas. She is an actress and a producer. She is most recently known for her role in The Lady Killers, that was 2004, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, 1997, and also Nothing to Lose, 1997. We also have our returning characters, Tommy, Chucky, and Kimmy, and Phil Lil. And that's about it. That's everyone in the episode. So they're all reprising their roles. Like, we already know how they are. If you watch Rugrats, you just know there's no change in their characters or anything like that. As far as visual style, this is a slightly more modernized look. You can tell that they were starting to move towards using computers for the entire episode, but they just weren't there yet. This is like that in-between phase from them being like really scratchy in the mid to late 90s, and then being really, really clean, bright, and digitalized in the later part of the early 2000s. Like, this episode was in 2001. I think Rugrats started to become all computer animated in probably 2002, 2003, those last couple of seasons. So the visual style was fine, though. It still felt a bit more like the older Rugrats, which of course I appreciated. As for animation style, it's pretty similar with the visual style. It's right in between the goodness of the 90s and right before this show started to go south a bit with being completely computer animated. And computer animated wasn't what made the show go south. What made the show start going south was the writing and the storytelling. This episode has great storytelling, great pacing, and that is to be expected from Rugrats. That's part of the reason why Rugrats was so successful, because though it was intended for children, I'm sure teenagers, young adults, and older adults could watch the show and be entertained by what was happening. And this episode is a great representation of why we love Rugrats and why it's a successful show. And even though this episode was in 2001 and it was toward the end of the show's peak, it still maintained a lot of good writing and timing. To see Susie, a 3.5-year-old, feel that she hasn't accomplished anything and that would make her great enough to participate in Kwanzaa was kind of whoa, that's a little bit deep. I have a similar conversation with my peers, and we share the same type of sentiments, and we're 3 times as old. Was it 3? Are we 10 times as old as Susie? Right? 10? Yeah, I think it's about 10. We are much older than Susie is. And we have those same feelings. And it's in part comparing yourself to people you see on social media, or maybe you have some peers or associates that seem to be further along in their careers and in their journeys than you are. So you feel like maybe you have imposter syndrome because we're not there yet. We're still trying to get there. And so for some of us, we feel like we aren't deserving of certain things because we're not there yet. For Susie, again, to be 3.5 and be she shouldn't participate in Kwanzaa because she hasn't done anything to get an award, to get some sort of recognition or notoriety. It's girl, you're 3.5. You haven't even lost all your baby teeth yet. Calm down. So, I wanted to share some fun facts. And the same year that this episode came out, author Stephanie Green adapted the episode script into a picture book, The Rugrats' First Kwanzaa, and it was published by Simon Spotlight and Nickelodeon. So if you want to get the book for some people in your life, I wouldn't even say kids, just for some people in your life, I don't know if it's still available. I didn't do the Googles on that. Critics also praised Rugrats for introducing Kwanzaa to a wider audience. According to Den of Geek and Blavity, the series had become known and well received for celebrating a diverse set of holidays. A writer for the journal Life believed A Rugrats Kwanzaa might be some of children's only experiences with the holiday. In a 2017 retrospective review of Rugrats, Bustle's Madeline Agler commended its holiday specials for not talking down to the young viewers. And that's what I was saying a bit earlier. Susie's brother, who's like a nerd, and using appropriate and not baby language, despite them being babies, to talk about these facts as like facts bombs was very impressive. Anthony Bell, he directed the episode from a script by Lisa D. Hall, Jill Gorey, and Barbara Herndon. It was produced as a part of Nickelodeon's commitment to feature cultural diversity in its program. Rugrats was one of the first mainstream television shows to feature Kwanzaa. And that's what I was thinking too. And that's why I felt like it was important for this first round of Chrismahanukwanzakah, it was important that the Rugrats episode be the Kwanzaa episode for the podcast. As far as watching it again, I will absolutely watch it again, and I cannot wait to watch it with younger kids and to watch all like the holiday specials. Like, yes, we are aware of Christmas already, but to watch the Hanukkah episode and watch the Kwanzaa episode and watch them as like a little holiday cluster and just like really educating and expanding and sharing awareness that not everybody's celebrating the same holidays around this time of year. So, it was just really great. I found myself laughing at one moment. There's like a thunderstorm or something that knocks the power out. And what happens in that moment, I just wasn't expecting, and I found myself laughing out loud about that. As far as how many presents, I would give A Rugrats Kwanzaa 4.5 presents, okay? Because yes, I'm biased because it's Rugrats, and I'm also biased because it's one of the few episodes where Susie is put to the forefront. And I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I laughed out loud at it. So far, I believe I gave Klaus and A Nightmare Before Christmas 4 presents. That's why this gets 4.5. It can't get 5 because it's just that little bit that for me personally pushes it to the half. If you've seen A Rugrats Kwanzaa, what do you think? Would you watch it again? If you haven't seen it in a long time, I suggest you do so. Like I said, it's available on a lot of platforms, but I'm not going to mention those. If you have a HULU subscription, it's on there. Again, happy first day of Kwanzaa to those of you that celebrate it. And for those that don't, it's fine. I hope you have had a great Christmas, a great Kwanzaa. And I am having a really good time doing these episodes, which I say every episode, but it's true. And okay, so thank you again. We're getting very close to the end of this thing. And it's been great. It's been great. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Again, you can find me on all social media platforms, Simply Robotics. You can check out the website, simplyrobotics.com. Use the hashtag when listening to the show, Simply Robotics Pod. And take care and be well. Bye.
Happy Christmas, Kwanzaa to you.